You didn't just inherit their eyes or their posture. You inherited their survival code. They told you to be careful, but what they really meant was be small. Keep your light soft enough that no one mistakes it for defiance. Keep your dreams close enough that no one calls them pride. Your lineage learned safety through punishment. Safety from wars that trained the body to flinch before the sound of change. Safety from poverty that taught gratitude as obedience. Safety from gossip that made silence seem noble. Safety from churches that promised salvation for submission. Safety from neighbors' eyes that measured worth by conformity. So love became a checklist. Don't draw attention. Be grateful for what you have. Don't question authority. Don't speak first. Don't speak too loud. They called it wisdom. They said it would protect you. And maybe it did. Once. Maybe smallness really was safety when the world was crueler, when being different could cost you food, family, or faith. But somewhere along the line, that protection outlived its usefulness. The armor became inheritance. The inheritance became identity. And now it moves through you like instinct. That tightening in your chest before you ask for more. That sudden guilt when you start to want better. You think it's caution. You call it being realistic. But it's older than you. A reflex written by people who equated safety with invisibility. You learned to measure love by how well you obeyed fear. You learned to prove loyalty by self-limiting. You learned that peace came from disappearing just enough to keep everyone comfortable. Fear disguised itself as wisdom. Anxiety dressed itself as responsibility. Control sold itself as care. And because you loved them, you wore it. You let their trembling hands fasten it around your shoulders, promising it would keep you safe. You didn't notice how heavy it was becoming, how it pressed against your throat every time you wanted to speak, how it stiffened your posture when life invited you to expand. You learned to mistake tension for discipline, to call exhaustion devotion, to call avoidance humility, but you can feel it, the quiet revolt of your nervous system whispering, "This fear isn't mine." That's why you're here, why this video found you. The truth is, you didn't inherit their courage or their peace. You inherited their unfinished survival, and now life is asking you to finish what they couldn't. Quick check. Did you learn to call tension discipline and avoidance humility? If yes, say "I wore their armor" in the comments so others find you. Maybe this is you. You rehearse simple texts 3 times, terrified of tone. You scroll back through messages, rereading your own words, searching for a problem that doesn't exist. Compliments feel dangerous, like spotlights you didn't ask for, each one painting a target on your back. You ask 5 people for permission before making a decision you already know you want. You double-check, double-work, double-prove, so no one can ever call you lazy, ungrateful, or too much. You apologize for taking up a chair, a calendar slot, a breath. Your nervous system is fluent in apology. It speaks the language of preemption. Flinch before the blow, fix before the fault, smile before the silence becomes awkward. You didn't choose paralysis, you were praised for it. You're so mature for your age. You're the calm one. You never make trouble. You thought those words meant love. They actually meant compliance. You learned to stay invisible, to stay safe, to read emotional weather like a forecast, scanning for micro threats before they had a chance to erupt. It became your superpower and your prison. Because once you learn to sense danger everywhere, you start confusing safety with stillness. The moment things go quiet, your body doesn't rest. It braces. That's the tragedy of inherited fear. It lives in you not as memory, but as muscle. You don't remember what happened to your grandparents, but your shoulders do. Every flinch, every apology, every forced smile is an echo of what they couldn't say out loud, and maybe no one ever told you. But healing doesn't start with forgiveness. It starts with recognition. The moment you realize this anxiety isn't who I am, it's who I learned to be, something in your nervous system loosens its grip. You begin to notice the difference between thought and inheritance, between intuition and fear, between self-protection and self-erasure. The mind wants to understand it, but the body already knows. Every hesitation, every overcorrection, every time you edit yourself mid-sentence, it's your lineage whispering through your nerves, stay small and you'll survive. But you're not living their life anymore. You're the first one in your bloodline with the safety to pause and question it. And maybe that's what breaking a generational cycle really is. Not hating where you came from, but refusing to let fear keep living through you. Here's the mechanism no one explains. Fear is contagious, not through words but through nervous systems. A parent who lives in fight or flight teaches their child to scan for danger long before joy. You watch their eyes widen at risk. You watch their tone change in conflict. You watch their body collapse after holding everything together for too long. And you learned, not consciously, but biologically. You absorbed their vigilance like oxygen. The child of an anxious parent doesn't learn caution. They learn anticipation. They study rooms the way soldiers study battlefields. They learn that safety isn't about what's true. It's about what doesn't provoke. So they become peacekeepers, emotional translators. They confuse control with competence. And the body becomes a seismograph for everyone else's moods. Every twitch in someone's face becomes a sign. Every silence, a warning. Every pause, a possible rejection to prevent. This is the invisible curriculum of inherited fear, a hyper-attuned nervous system that interprets stillness as threat and chaos as home. You start planning 12 moves ahead. You catastrophize and call it realism. You delay your needs and call it maturity. You think you're protecting yourself, but really, you're protecting their ghosts. Because deep down, a part of you still believes that if you can just keep everything under control, no one will have to feel what they once felt. The pain wasn't yours, but you carried it like a duty.
If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support.
You became the keeper of dangers that no longer exist, the guardian of phantom threats, the one who flinches before life even raises its hand. And here's the dark truth. The family labelled your spontaneity as reckless because it made their anxiety spike. Your laughter reminded them of the freedom they couldn't handle. Your curiosity felt like rebellion. Your confidence, arrogance. They punished your joy and rewarded your restraint. Over time, joy began to feel unsafe, and restraint began to feel moral. So you became disciplined to the point of disconnection. You edited yourself until no one could call you selfish. You mistook obedience for virtue. But behind every good child, there's usually just a frightened nervous system, trying not to make anyone else uncomfortable. This is how trauma travels quietly, through love, not the lack of it, but the distortion of it. Love that says, I worry because I care. Love that never learned how to exist without fear attached. And here's what no one tells you. You can love someone deeply and still absorb their terror. You can inherit their unfinished stories and mistake them for your intuition. Because fear doesn't just pass through behavior, it passes through biology, through tone, through breath, through silence. When you grew up watching someone brace before life, you learned to brace too. But you can't live your life while holding your breath for someone else's storm. The truth is, you were never afraid of the world. You were afraid of how they would react if you stopped fearing it. And that is where inherited fear ends. Not when you stop being scared, but when you realize the fear was never truly yours. If you felt your shoulders drop hearing this, comment "not mine," so you remember this moment. This is why it's sticky. Society applauds inherited fear because it stabilizes everything. You learned that predictability equals belonging, that emotional stillness equals professionalism, that silence equals respect. Society doesn't heal the anxious, it promotes them. Because anxious people overperform. They double-check the project, fill the silence, anticipate everyone's needs. The economy runs on inherited fear, on people who feel guilty resting, who confuse exhaustion with worth, who measure love by usefulness. You became the dependable one because the world depends on dependables staying afraid to stop. And the cost? A quiet life that looks stable from the outside, but feels like self-erasure on the inside. You were told that humility was holy, that ambition was arrogance, that wanting more meant betraying the people who settled. They taught you to dim yourself and called it balance. They taught you to over-explain and called it empathy. They taught you to ignore intuition and called it faith. We mistake compliance for character. We confuse anxiety with morality. We don't celebrate calm. We celebrate repression. You learned to look calm while dying inside, and they gave you an award for it. But what happens when the person who keeps the peace finally realizes the peace was never real? That's when the system starts to crack. Because your inherited fear doesn't just hold you back, it keeps entire generations looping in safe mediocrity. The world tells you to know your place and calls it tradition. It tells you to be realistic and calls it wisdom. It tells you to not make waves and calls it maturity. But every great change in history began with someone who refused to perform calmness for other people's comfort. Someone whose voice trembled but spoke anyway. Someone who realized that fear disguised as virtue is still fear. You inherited their fear, but the world kept feeding it, dressing it up as morality, monetizing it as productivity. You don't just break personal patterns when you stop obeying fear. You interrupt entire systems that depend on your hesitation. The day you stop apologizing for being too much, something ancient in the culture trembles. That is why the world resists your freedom. Not because you're wrong, but because you're disruptive. Because a person no longer governed by fear cannot be controlled by praise, and that is the beginning of liberation. You think you've outgrown it. You have a job now, a calm voice, a to-do list that proves you're in control. But the fear is still in your bones. It just learned better manners. Watch closely. It hides in the little things. In how you rehearse a text 3 times, not because you care about grammar, but because you can't bear the silence that might follow. In how you never send the application, not because you're unqualified, but because you can already hear the rejection before anyone says it. In how you feel your chest tighten when someone says, "Tell me what you think." Because you learned early on that honesty rearranges the air in dangerous ways. You call it anxiety, but really, it's memory. Your body remembers being punished for being visible. It remembers being loved for being careful. So now, every time you want to leap, something whispers, "Don't. Don't shine too brightly. Don't speak too boldly. Don't make anyone uncomfortable." That voice isn't you. It's the echo of generations saying, "Be smaller so we can stay safe." You apologize when someone bumps into you. You overstay in relationships that drain you because leaving feels like betrayal. You call your parents before big decisions, waiting for their approval like it's oxygen. You convince yourself it's respect. But part of you still believes their calm is the only proof you're safe. You feel relief when plans cancel, not because you're tired, but because you're done performing composure. You've been mistaking vigilance for kindness your whole life. And then you wonder why you're exhausted after a single conversation. You weren't born cautious. You were trained to protect other people's comfort at the cost of your own. When you were quiet, they called you mature. When you suppressed, they called you strong. When you ignored your intuition, they called you respectful. But none of that was virtue. It was fear, rewarded. And here's the strangest part. It still earns applause. You get promoted for saying yes. You get liked for being agreeable. You get labelled easy to work with while dying inside. They mistake your nervous system for reliability. They think your exhaustion is dedication. And because you're still addicted to safety, you play along. You smile, even when your mouth tastes like metal. You say, "Of course," when what you really mean is, "I'm disappearing." You've been living on a delay, 5 seconds behind your own truth. Every yes that meant no. Every "it's fine" that meant "it's killing me." That's how inherited fear survives, not in your memories, but in your reflexes. And it's brilliant in its own tragic way. Because the fear doesn't just protect you, it protects them, the ghosts of your lineage, from the pain of seeing you do what they never dared. That's why it feels treacherous to grow. Why liberation feels like guilt. Why success tastes bittersweet. You think you're failing them, but what you're really doing is breaking the agreement that kept them small. You don't owe their ghosts your caution. You don't owe their fear your loyalty. You owe your future your freedom. Every time you hesitate, remember this: you're not protecting your safety. You're protecting their story, and it's time that story ends. Let's tell the forbidden truth. Caution didn't save your elders. It trapped them. They didn't travel because money is tight. They didn't speak up because we don't air dirty laundry. They didn't try again because failure is shameful. And now their stories live in you as reflex. The whispers in your head are not prophecy. They're recordings. You were born in a different world. The original danger is gone. Only the program remains. You're not careful. You're haunted. Haunted by the echo of people who never got to feel free. People who traded expansion for acceptance. People who confused obedience with safety because the cost of rebellion once was death, exile, or shame. But those stakes are gone now. The ghosts haven't updated their software, and here you are, running a 1950s survival code on 2025 hardware. No wonder your body glitches every time you reach for something bigger. It's not sabotage, it's loyalty. You're still trying to keep the ancestors calm, but they don't need your obedience anymore. They need your evolution. Because every generation has one person who breaks the pattern not by hating their family, but by outgrowing their fear. That's you. The one who realizes that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the refusal to pass the inheritance forward. The one who understands that love doesn't mean imitation, it means completion. Your task isn't to stay small out of respect for their suffering. It's to make sure their suffering wasn't in vain. Every time you say the hard truth they couldn't, you rewrite the bloodline. Every time you take a risk they never dared, you open a window in the ancestral house. Every time you rest without guilt, you heal the part of them that believed exhaustion was holiness. Every time you stop apologizing for being different, you end a century-long sentence of self-betrayal. You are not betraying them by evolving. You're redeeming them by refusing to repeat what broke them. The moment you stop calling fear responsibility, you stop being their echo and start being their proof. This is the great reversal. The courage they couldn't live becomes the safety you create. The silence they endured becomes the voice you use. The dreams they buried become the foundation you stand on. You were never meant to inherit their fear. You were meant to transmute it, to take what was once survival and alchemize it into creation. The same sensitivity that made you anxious is what now makes you aware. The same vigilance that made you tense is what now makes you perceptive. Nothing was wasted. Not the fear, not the restraint, not the hesitation. Every shadow in your lineage was material for your light. You are the evolutionary upgrade of everyone who came before you. So when the voice says, "Be careful," answer gently, "I am. I'm careful with my power now, not my fear." When the body tightens before a leap, whisper back, "We're not in danger anymore." Because you're not. The danger isn't outside you now, it's the outdated map inside you. And the way you break the spell is by acting in the direction the fear forbids. Send the message. Speak the truth. Take the risk. Let the ancestors watch you do the thing they never could, and rest. This is the sacred rebellion, turning inherited caution into conscious courage. The family line didn't end with you, it evolved. Here's where it changes, not in theory, not in therapy notes, in the tiny, trembling moment where your body wants to freeze and you move anyway. This is where you begin to rewrite the code. You start small. You say no without an essay attached. You ask for help without apologizing. You let someone see you before you've edited yourself. These are micro-revolutions, because micro-risks reprogram the nervous system faster than any affirmation ever could. You can't outthink fear. You have to outlive it. You measure success differently now. Instead of asking, "Did I impress them?" ask, "Was I honest, and did I survive the guilt?" That's how healing looks in real time. Messy, disobedient, alive. Every boundary you hold is surgery on your bloodline. Every act of truth is an upgrade to the collective nervous system that raised you. Because here's what no one tells you. Healing feels like betrayal at first. It feels like disobedience, like arrogance, like you're walking away from something sacred. But that's not morality speaking. That's extinction anxiety from your lineage. The ancestral voice that begs, "If you stop obeying fear, who will keep us safe?" Answer gently, "I will." Differently. Because adult safety doesn't come from shrinking. It comes from self-trust, from knowing you can survive the discomfort that safety once outsourced to other people. Guilt will still come. It always does when you break family rules. Guilt will dress itself as conscience. It will whisper, "You're selfish, irresponsible, ungrateful." But guilt is not your guide. Guilt is fear's final disguise. It shows up right before the door opens. So when it appears, don't apologize. Smile. It means you're near the exit from generations of people who mistook exhaustion for virtue. The exit from the script that said safety equals silence. The exit from the unspoken rule that joy must always be justified. You'll feel your body resist, shaking, doubting, second-guessing, because freedom isn't familiar. That's how you know it's working. Healing isn't about feeling better. It's about feeling everything you once suppressed. The panic, the guilt, the expansion. Let it all come. The body that once flinched at every what if is learning to breathe through uncertainty. The child that once froze to keep love is learning to move without permission. The adult you're becoming is learning to belong to themselves. Every risk you take now, every sentence you speak that trembles as it leaves your mouth, is not rebellion. It's reparenting. You're showing your body that fear can exist without control. That safety doesn't require submission. You're learning to treat your nervous system like a student, not an enemy. See? You whisper after each leap, "We didn't die. We just changed," because that's what courage actually is. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to inherit it unexamined. The day you realize that you stop living for safety and start living for truth, that's when fear loses its throne, and you, the once careful one, become the architect of a new lineage. The one who loves without calculation, speaks without rehearsing, moves without waiting for permission. This is what healing looks like, doing what they couldn't, and surviving the guilt that follows. It's sacred work. The kind that turns family curses into future instincts. The kind that takes trembling and turns it into trust. The kind that builds a bridge between who you were and who you're becoming, one brave act at a time. Kierkegaard called anxiety the dizziness of freedom. That trembling you feel isn't a warning, it's potential waking up. The flutter in your chest, the doubt in your throat, they're not malfunctions. They're your system recalibrating to a life that's finally yours. Nietzsche named it the will to power, not dominance over others, but expansion beyond inherited limits. You're not being rebellious, you're being alive. Jung would say you're individuating, becoming a self designed by consciousness, not by the family's alarm system. Their fear built cages, your awareness builds wings. Every time you choose truth over tradition, you move from instinct to intention. Every time you risk discomfort for integrity, you graduate from survival to sovereignty. This is not self-help. This is evolution in real time. Humanity doesn't advance through collective agreement. It advances through the few who refuse to inherit fear as identity. That's the paradox of awakening. It feels personal, but it's cosmic. When one nervous system unlearns fear, consciousness itself expands. Your healing isn't self-centered, it's systemic repair. You're retuning a piece of the human instrument. You are, in the truest sense, a philosopher of the body. If your hands shake, you're not failing, you're updating. Every deep breath you take is a dissertation on freedom. Every boundary you hold is a declaration of new ethics. Every act of self-trust is a rebellion against centuries of hierarchy and shame. Kierkegaard saw this too, that faith isn't belief in something external. It's the courage to walk forward when every inherited map dissolves. That's why awakening always feels like vertigo. You're standing on ground that no one before you has tested. But notice what happens when you stop calling that feeling fear and start calling it flight. The same trembling that once kept you small becomes the vibration that lifts you higher. Anxiety is potential in motion. Nietzsche wrote that those who climb the mountain often look mad to those who never left the valley. That's the price of expansion, misunderstanding. But here's the gift. Once you reach the height of your own truth, you realize you were never escaping them. You were becoming what they were too afraid to imagine. Jung believed this moment, this convergence of awareness and autonomy, is where the self meets the divine, not in the heavens, in the ordinary act of saying, I choose myself consciously. Because what is divinity if not the capacity to create from freedom instead of fear? When you stop moving from trauma's reflex and start moving from soul's direction, you align with what philosophers call essence. That's where meaning is born, not in safety, but in surrender to the unknown. So, if you feel the trembling, good. You are standing at the frontier of your own consciousness. You are the bridge between what your ancestors survived and what your descendants will thrive in. You are proof that awareness itself is evolution. And while the world still rewards obedience, history always remembers the ones who disobeyed fear first. That's what you're doing here. You're not just healing, you're participating in the ongoing creation of human freedom. The philosophers wrote about it, the mystics felt it, but you are living it breath by breath. The anxiety, the guilt, the trembling, they are not the end of the story. They're the sound of new wings unfolding. They'll still call you reckless, ungrateful, irresponsible, but that's only because your freedom exposes their fear. Because courage looks like betrayal to those who survive by control. Let them misunderstand. Let them whisper. You weren't born to protect their past. You were born to prove it can end. You didn't inherit their fear to obey it. You inherited it to transform it, to turn panic into possibility, silence into expression, caution into creation. You are the interruption in their pattern, the quiet, steady rebellion they prayed for, but could never perform. You are the proof that survival can evolve into freedom. One day, when someone asks how the cycle finally broke, the answer will be simple. You stopped mistaking fear for love, because love doesn't cage you, it expands you. Love doesn't say, be careful. It says, become. You are not abandoning them. You are fulfilling what they couldn't finish. Their story was the struggle for safety. Yours is the discovery of freedom. And that's how evolution happens. One nervous system at a time, remembering that peace is not the absence of danger, but the presence of truth. The trembling stops here. The silence ends here. The inheritance changes form, right here in you. So when the old fear rises again, don't fight it. Thank it. Tell it. You did your job. You kept us alive, but I'm safe now. You can rest. Then walk forward, gently, deliberately, unapologetically free. Because this is how the story shifts, not through war, but through awareness. Through one person deciding that fear is no longer the family language. You are that person. The lineage of trembling ends with your stillness. The lineage of silence ends with your voice, and the lineage of fear ends with your breath. So ask yourself now, what fear have you been protecting that was never yours to carry? If you're ready to break the cycle, write it below. It ends with me. Not as defiance, but as devotion. Devotion to every ancestor who couldn't. Devotion to every descendant who won't have to. It ends here, right here, with you. And as the silence settles, you may notice something new, a lightness where the fear used to live. That's not emptiness, that's space, the kind of space that creation needs to begin again.